Welcome back to another deep dive. You know the drill. You give us the source material, we give you the deep dive. And this time, oh boy, this time we've got something special.
Buckle up.
We're going back to 1953, folks. A science fiction short story called Adolescents Only by Irving E. Cox Jr.
It's high school, but with aliens, what's not to love?
It's a fascinating mix. On the one hand, you have those classic high school tropes, but then Cox throws in things like transmutation of elements, time manipulation, hypnoticord, learning capsules.
It really is. This isn't just your typical after-school special, is it?
No, this is some serious sci-fi.
Right.
We're talking mind-bending stuff here.
It's high-concept science fiction.
And at the heart of it all is Gary Elvin, a high school English teacher who finds himself in way over his head.
He does.
Imagine a world where teenagers suddenly become smarter than every adult.
It's every parent's worst nightmare.
It is.
But for Elvin, it's his reality.
So where does this wild ride begin?
Well, we start in San Benedicto, California, where Elvin is boarding with a rather successful ranching family, the Schermerhorns.
Okay, so we've got this educated teacher, but he's struggling financially.
Right.
And he's living with this family who's made it big without much formal education. I feel like there's a bit of tension there already.
Oh, there's definitely some underlying tension there.
Yeah.
And things get even more complicated when a mysterious rocket crashes near the Schermerhorn property.
A rocket crash.
A rocket crash. And guess who's the only witness?
Gary Elvin.
Gary Elvin. Driven by curiosity, he finds the rocket and makes an interesting discovery. Inside, there's this strip of metal with all these weird globes on it. And then there's this cylinder filled with, get this, colorful spheres.
So what does he do?
He keeps the metal strip, but then, high school party back at the house. Gets a little distracted, leaves the cylinder unattended.
Teenagers. Parties. I think we can guess what happens next.
Oh yeah, classic high school stuff. When Elvin gets back, the cylinder's almost empty. The students have eaten the spheres.
They ate them!
They thought they were candy.
Oh, no.
Oh.
And that's when things take a turn, right?
Things get very strange.
Give me an example.
Okay, picture this. School assembly. The principal's giving a speech, and suddenly he breaks into a rumba. Spontaneous rumba.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, that's bizarre.
Teachers start having mental breakdowns. It's chaos.
And the students?
The students are acing tests. But not just any tests. They're discussing advanced scientific theories, solving complex problems, and even, get this, transmuting a Bunsen burner into solid gold.
A Bunsen burner into gold.
Solid gold.
That's not in the curriculum.
Definitely not.
So what does Gary Elvin make of all this?
Well, at first he thinks it's a prank. Maybe some elaborate scheme cooked up by the kids. Then he starts to consider mass hypnosis. But as things escalate, he becomes genuinely afraid. Something is happening, something beyond his understanding.
It sounds terrifying. But what's the truth behind this transformation? Where did these spheres come from?
Hold on to your hats, because the truth is out of this world. Those spheres, those colorful little candies, were actually learning capsules from a dying alien civilization.
They were aliens.
Aliens. They sent these capsules containing their entire knowledge base to Earth, the only planet they found with intelligent life.
So these teenagers have essentially downloaded an entire alien encyclopedia into their brains.
Exactly.
Wow, that is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it is. And it doesn't take long for things to spiral out of control. Remember those gold transmutations?
Yeah.
Well, imagine an entire desert turned into gold.
The whole desert.
The whole thing. Gold rush of epic proportions. Currencies crash, nations go bankrupt.
It sounds like the end of the world.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
And it's all thanks to these teenagers with their newfound knowledge.
But are they trying to destroy the world? Are they malicious?
That's the thing. They're not bad kids. They just don't fully understand the consequences of their actions.
It's a classic case of too much power too soon.
It is. And it raises some very interesting questions. Like, what happens when the younger generation surpasses the older generation in knowledge and power?
That's a question we're grappling with even today, isn't it? Technology is advancing at an incredible pace.
It is.
And the younger generation is often at the forefront of these changes.
They're the digital natives. They grew up with the internet in their hands.
So what happens when those who grew up with smartphones and AI start making decisions that affect the entire world?
Adolescents Only gives us a glimpse into that possibility. It's a cautionary tale about the potential consequences of unchecked power, even in the hands of those who seem well-intentioned.
So these teenagers, they've unleashed this global chaos, but they're not evil masterminds.
No, They're kids who suddenly find themselves with a level of knowledge and power that they never asked for.
It's a lot to handle.
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in Gary Elvin.
What happens to him?
He becomes obsessed
Obsessed with what?
with the students' power. He wants what they have.
Mhm.
He wants that alien knowledge. Remember that metal strip he found in the rocket?
The one with the weird globes.
That's the one. Well, it turns out that's not just any piece of metal. It's a hypnotocord. And when Elvin comes into contact with it,
What happens?
it triggers a download
A download of what?
of the alien civilization's entire knowledge base straight into his brain.
So now Elvin has the same knowledge as the students.
He does.
And what does he do with it?
He makes a deal. He offers to help the students with their, shall we say, predicament in exchange for control
Control of what?
of something quite remarkable. Something that pushes the boundaries of science fiction even further.
Yeah.
Something that could potentially undo all the damage they've caused.
I'm on the edge of my seat here. What is it?
It's a time machine.
A time machine.
A time machine.
Hmm.
The students, using their advanced knowledge, have figured out how to travel through time. And Elvin wants in on it.
This is getting good. What do the students do?
Well, they're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
They need Elvin's help to complete the time machine.
So they agree to his terms.
They do. But there's the twist.
A twist. I love twists.
This is a good one. Instead of giving Elvin control of the time machine, they use it to send him back. Back to a time before the rocket crash. Back to a time before any of this ever happened.
They erased his memory.
Completely. And everyone else's, except their own.
Wow. So they outsmart him, save the day, and erase everyone's memory. Happy ending.
Not quite. The story ends with the students, now arguably the most intelligent beings on Earth, choosing to guide humanity from the shadows. They're manipulating events, shaping the future according to their own vision.
That's a little creepy, isn't it?
It is, and it raises all sorts of questions about the nature of power, responsibility, and free will.
It sounds like we've got a lot more to unpack here.
We do. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's a lot to process. This whole gold rush, it feels like more than just, an economic disaster.
Right. It's a symbol, isn't it,
Mm.
of that human desire for more, always wanting more.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's that desire that leads to their downfall.
It's like a cautionary tale, almost.
It is a cautionary tale about greed and the dangers of unchecked ambition.
And you've got this backdrop of, well, generational conflict, right?
Absolutely. The adults in the story, they just don't get it.
They don't get what?
They don't understand the power of this new knowledge. They're stuck in their old ways of thinking.
They can't adapt.
Exactly. They can't fathom the possibility of transmutation, of time travel. It's beyond their comprehension.
But the students, they embrace it.
They do, and they suffer the consequences.
And then there's Elvin. It's funny, isn't it? He's the teacher. He's supposed to be the one with the knowledge.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But he's the one who dismisses the idea of alien technology at first, calls it a hallucination. But then he becomes the one who's most consumed by it.
It's almost like he's projecting his own insecurities onto the students. He feels inadequate, left behind. And that fuels his desire for power.
His ambition gets the better of him. He even tries to steal from the students.
He does. He tries to justify it, of course. National security, the greater good. But deep down, it's all about him.
He wants what they have.
He wants that power, that knowledge, that control.
But the students, they're the ones who actually try to fix things. They build the time machine. They try to erase the whole mess.
They do. And in a way, they succeed.
But they also choose to manipulate events from the shadows.
That's where things get really interesting. They become these benevolent dictators, shaping the world according to their own vision.
Is that a good thing?
That's the question, isn't it? Is it ever okay to take away someone's free will, even if you think you're doing it for their own good?
It's a slippery slope.
It is. And Cox doesn't give us any easy answers. He leaves us to wrestle with those uncomfortable questions.
I mean, this story feels so relevant today. We're living in a world where technology is advancing at an unprecedented rate.
Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing, it's mind-boggling.
And it's the younger generation who are driving a lot of these changes.
They're the ones who are comfortable with this technology. They understand it. They're not afraid of it.
But what happens when that power falls into the wrong hands?
That's a scary thought.
It is. And that's what makes Adolescents Only so compelling. It forces us to confront these very real anxieties about the future.
And it does it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
So we've got this global crisis. Time travel, alien technology, and a group of teenagers who are suddenly the most powerful beings on Earth. What's not to love?
It's like a wild ride. And it makes you think, what if this really happened? What if the next generation really did surpass us in every way?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
We should, because the future is coming whether we're ready for it or not.
And those learning capsules, they're fascinating, aren't they?
Instant knowledge. It's a tempting thought.
Imagine downloading an entire skill set in seconds.
Learning a new language, mastering a musical instrument, becoming a surgeon overnight.
But it also raises some ethical questions, doesn't it?
It does. What happens to the value of experience, of hard work, of mentorship?
Does knowledge become meaningless if it's so easily acquired?
That's a question worth considering.
And then there's that hypnotic. It's not just knowledge transfer, right?
It's mind control.
It's a bit creepy, isn't it?
It is. It makes you wonder about the nature of free will. If someone can implant knowledge into your brain, can they also control your thoughts, your actions?
That's a chilling thought.
It is. And it's one of the many thought-provoking ideas that Cox explores in Adolescents Only.
This story has got me thinking about my own relationship with technology.
In what way?
I mean, I'm pretty tech savvy, I think, but sometimes I feel like I'm falling behind. The younger generation, they just seem to get it so much faster.
They do. They're digital natives. It's in their DNA.
And it makes me wonder, are we as a society doing enough to prepare for the future? Are we teaching the next generation how to use this power responsibly?
That's a big question, and it's one that we need to start addressing now.
We do, because the future is closer than we think.
It is. And Adolescents Only reminds us that we need to be ready for it.
I think that's a good place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much more to explore.
There is. And we'll pick up where we left off in our next installment.
So stay tuned, folks. The deep dive continues. It's interesting how Cox portrays the students. They're not these, like, evil geniuses.
Right.
They're just kids who suddenly find themselves with all this knowledge and power.
They're in over their heads.
Yeah. They make mistakes,
Of course.
but they also try to learn from them.
They do. And they try to do the right thing,
Yeah.
even if it means making some tough choices.
Like erasing everyone's memory and manipulating events from the shadows.
It's a morally ambiguous ending,
It is.
but it makes you think.
It does. About the nature of power
And responsibility.
and about the relationship between generations.
Exactly. What happens when the younger generation surpasses the older generation? Not just in terms of technology, but in terms of wisdom and understanding.
It's a question we're facing more and more in our own time, isn't it?
It is. The world is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
And the younger generation is often the one leading the charge.
So what can we learn from Adolescents Only?
I think it teaches us the importance of humility.
Humility.
Yeah. The adults in the story, they're so sure of themselves. They think they know everything. And that's ultimately their downfall.
They're not open to new ideas.
Exactly. They're not willing to learn from the younger generation.
And Elvin, he's a prime example of that.
He is. He's so focused on acquiring knowledge and power that he loses sight of what really matters.
He forgets about ethics.
And compassion.
And in the end, it's his undoing.
It is.
So what's the takeaway here?
I think it's about finding a balance between knowledge and wisdom, between power and responsibility, between the old and the new.
It's about being open to learning no matter your age.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
about recognizing the potential of the younger generation. They may not have all the answers, but they have a fresh perspective. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo.
And that's something we need more of in the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. We need people who are willing to think outside the box. People who are not afraid to push the boundaries.
People who are willing to ask tough questions.
And to find new solutions.
I think Adolescents Only has given us all a lot to think about.
It has. And it's a story that will stay with me for a long time.
Me too. So, to all our listeners out there, what do you think? Did the students make the right choice? Is it ever okay to manipulate events, even if you think you're doing it for the greater good? Head over to our social media and let us know. This deep dive may be over, but the conversation continues.